character, Marcus Webb, the wind howled like a wounded beast through the pine trees, rattling the windows of Marcus's Webb's remote cabin with enough force to wake the dead. He'd lived in these mountains for 8 years now, long enough to know the difference between a regular winter storm and something that could kill you if you weren't careful. Tonight felt like the latter. Marcus set down his coffee mug and peered through the frost-covered glass. The snow was coming down sideways, thick flakes dancing in the amber glow of his porch light like angry spirits. He'd seen storms before. Hell, he'd worked through plenty of them during his 25 years as a paramedic in Denver, but retirement hadn't dulled his instincts. Something about tonight felt different, electric with danger. The knocking came just past midnight, barely audible. Above the storm's fury, 3 soft taps, then silence. Marcus frowned, thinking he'd imagined it. Who would be out in this weather? The nearest neighbor was 5 miles down a treacherous mountain road, and the park rangers didn't patrol this area during blizzards. Sound came again, weaker this time, or desperate. Marcus grabbed his heavy coat and flashlight, his old training kicking in. In the mountains, people died from exposure in minutes during storms like this. He yanked open the door, and the Arctic wind slammed into him like a physical blow, stealing his breath and sending snow spiraling into his warm cabin. At first he saw nothing but swirling white. Then his flashlight beam caught movement. A dark shape huddled against his porch railing. It's barely visible beneath a growing drift of snow. Marcus stepped forward, his heart hammering as the light revealed what lay at his doorstep. A figure knelt in the snow, cradling something against their chest. Even through the storm, Marcus could see the distinctive features that marked her as Kethany, one of the alien refugees scattered across Earth since the war ended. Her skin held a faint silver luminescence that seemed to pulse weakly in the darkness, and her elongated limbs trembled violently from cold and exhaustion. But it wasn't the alien woman that made Marcus's blood freeze. It was the tiny bundle she clutched with desperate strength, a child, no bigger than a human newborn. Its small face barely visible beneath layers of tattered cloth. "Please," the woman whispered, her accented English barely audible above the wind. Ice crystals clung to her dark hair, and her large violet eyes held a desperation that transcended language barriers. "My daughter, she needs... ... The woman's words dissolved into a racking cough, and Marcus saw blood speckled the snow at her knees. She was dying hypothermia, maybe internal injuries, certainly starvation. He'd seen enough death to recognize it approaching. "Jesus Christ," Marcus muttered, his paramedic instincts overriding 20 years of learned prejudice against the alien refugees. He knelt beside the woman, ignoring the snow soaking through his pants. "How long have you been out here?" The woman's eyes fluttered, struggling to focus on his face. "Days," she breathed, looking for ... somewhere safe ... Marcus carefully lifted the bundle from her arms, feeling how light it was. Too light. The infant stirred at his touch, revealing features that were unmistakably alien yet achingly vulnerable. Her skin held the same silver glow as her mother's, but fainter, like a dying star. "Come on," Marcus said, sliding one arm under the woman's shoulders. "Both of you. Inside. Now." The woman's legs gave out the moment she tried to stand, but Marcus caught her, supporting her weight as he guided them both through his doorway. The warmth of the cabin hit them like a wall, and the woman collapsed onto his couch, her breathing shallow and labored. Marcus laid the infant gently beside her mother, then quickly built up the fire in his stone hearth. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking pulses, assessing breathing, cataloging injuries with the cold professionalism that had kept him sane through decades of emergency medicine. The woman was worse off than he'd initially thought. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, possible pneumonia. The child seemed stronger, but was clearly undernourished. Both of them would have been dead by morning if they'd stayed outside, as warmth began to return to the room. The woman's eyes found his again. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching toward her daughter with trembling fingers. "Her name is Zara. She is all I have left." Marcus nodded grimly, already reaching for his phone to call Dr. Tomlin down in town. The nearest hospital was 3 hours away in good weather, impossible to reach in this storm. Whatever happened next? These two aliens, this mother and child who'd somehow ended up at his door, were now his responsibility. Outside, the wind continued its relentless assault on the mountain, but inside Marcus's Webb's cabin, a new chapter was beginning. Character: Dr. Vera Tomlin. The phone's shrill ring cut through the pre-dawn darkness like a scalpel, jerking Dr. Vera Tomlin from her first decent sleep in weeks. She fumbled for the receiver, squinting at the clock for 17 a.m. In a town like Pine Ridge, calls at this hour usually meant someone was dying. "Doc, it's Marcus Webb up on Copper Mountain," came the familiar gravelly voice. "I need you to come up here now." Vera sat up straighter, instantly alert. Marcus didn't panic. 25 years as a paramedic had burned that capacity out of him long ago. If he was calling, it was serious. "What's the situation, Marcus?" Pause. Then quietly. "I've got a mother and infant. They're in bad shape, hypothermia, malnutrition, possible respiratory infection, need immediate medical attention. Can you bring them down? The storm's supposed to break around dawn." "Vera?" Marcus's tone stopped her cold. "They're Kethany." Words hung in the air like a death sentence. Vera felt her stomach drop, her mind immediately racing through the implications. Federal law required all alien refugees to be reported within 6 hours of contact. The Refugee Monitoring Division would have agents here by noon, and then she'd heard the stories. Detention centers, medical experiments, children separated from parents and never seen again. "Marcus, you know I can't. The baby's dying." "Vera," his voice cracked slightly, "she can't be more than a few months old. Her mother collapsed on my porch in the middle of a blizzard. What the hell was I supposed to do? Let them freeze?" Vera closed her eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible choice settling on her shoulders. She'd taken an oath first, do no harm. But helping alien refugees was a felony under the Terran Security Act. Her medical license, her practice, her entire life's work, all of it would disappear if she was caught. "Please," Marcus continued, "I know what I'm asking. But they're not soldiers, Vera. They're just a mother and her baby. And they're going to die without help." Vera stared out her bedroom window at the swirling snow, remembering why she'd become a doctor in the first place. If it wasn't for the comfortable suburban practice she'd left behind, or the prestige, or even the money. It was for moments like this, when someone's life hung in the balance, and she was the only one who could tip the scales. "I'll be there in an hour," she said quietly. "And Marcus?" This conversation never happened. The drive up Copper Mountain was treacherous, her SUV's chains barely maintaining grip on the ice-slicked road. Vera's hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from the cold, but from the magnitude of what she was about to do. She'd packed her emergency kit with antibiotics. For fluids and equipment she prayed she wouldn't need. Marcus met her at the door, his weathered face grim. They're in the living room. The mother, she calls herself the Souche. She's conscious but weak. The baby Zara, He shook his head. "You need to see for yourself." Vera followed him inside, her breath catching as she saw them. Thisa lay on the couch, her silver-tinged skin dull and lifeless, violet eyes tracking Vera's movement with desperate hope. But it was the infant that made Vera's heart clench, tiny, fragile, her luminescent skin flickering like a failing light bulb. "Hello, Thisa," Vera said softly, kneeling beside the couch. "I'm Dr. Tomlin. May I examine your daughter?" Thisa nodded weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "I has not eaten properly in days. I had no milk left to give her." "It," Vera gently lifted Zara, feeling how light she was, dangerously underweight. The baby's breathing was shallow, rapid. Dehydration, malnutrition, and something else. Feverish heat that didn't feel entirely human. Vera had studied Kethany's physiology in medical school, but the textbooks were woefully incomplete. "Marcus, I need you to start an IV on Thisa. Lactated ringers, slow drip." Vera's training took over, pushing aside her fear. "Get me that space heater from your bedroom?" "We need to raise their core temperature gradually." As she worked, taking vital signs and administering medication, Vera found herself marveling at the trust in Thessa's eyes. This woman had every reason to fear humans, The war had only ended 5 years ago, and the peace was fragile at best. Yet here she was, allowing a human doctor to treat her dying child. "Why did you come here?" Vera asked, as she prepared a feeding tube for Zara. "Pine Ridge is hundreds of miles from the nearest refugee settlement." Thessa's eyes filled with tears that sparkled like liquid starlight. "The settlement. There was sickness. Many died. I took Zara and ran, but we had nowhere to go. No one would help us." She looked at Marcus, then back at Vera. "Humans see us as monsters. You see us as patients." Over the next 3 hours, Vera worked with desperate efficiency. She stabilized both mother and child, administering fluids, nutrients, and carefully calculated doses of medication. Slowly, Zara's skin began to brighten. Her breathing grew stronger. Thessa's fever broke just as the sun crested the mountains, but as dawn light filled the cabin, Vera knew their respite was temporary. By law, she should already have reported them. Every moment she delayed increased the risk of discovery and the consequences for everyone involved. "They'll live," she told Marcus, packing her equipment. "But they need ongoing care. Specialized nutrition for the baby, antibiotics for Thessa's respiratory infection," and she hesitated. "Someone needs to make a decision about what happens." "Next?" Marcus nodded grimly. "I know, but not today. Today, they're alive because of you." As Vera drove back down the mountain, she couldn't shake the image of Zara's tiny hand curling around her finger, or the gratitude in Thessa's alien eyes. She'd crossed a line today, violated her oath to her government in service of her oath as a healer. She only hoped it wouldn't destroy them all. Sheriff Jonas Reeve had always prided himself on knowing everything that happened in Pine Ridge County. In a community of barely 3,000 souls scattered across 40 square miles of mountain wilderness, secrets were rare and usually harmless. Who was sleeping with whom, which ranchers were poaching deer, where the teenagers went to drink on Friday nights. But the call that came in at 8:30 that Tuesday morning shattered his comfortable illusion of control. "Sheriff, it's Betty down at Malone's Gas." The elderly woman's voice crackled through his radio, thick with barely concealed excitement. "That Dr. Tomlin just came through here, and she looked like she hadn't slept a wink. Bought every can of that fancy baby formula we stock, plus antibiotics from the veterinary section. Whole bunch of medical supplies, too." Jonas frowned, setting down his coffee. Vera Tomlin was the most level-headed person he knew, former big city surgeon, who'd traded her comfortable practice for a small-town clinic after her divorce. She didn't make emergency supply runs unless someone was in serious trouble. "Any idea? Who's sick, Betty?" "That's just it. Nobody in town's got babies right now." And she was asking real strange questions about that old mining road up to Marcus's Webb's place. Wanted to know if it was still passable after the storm. Marcus Webb, the hermit paramedic who'd retreated to his mountain cabin after retirement. Avoiding human contact like it carried plague, Jonas had always respected the man's desire for solitude. But this was starting to sound like something more complicated. "Thanks, Betty. I'll look into it." Jonas spent the drive up Copper Mountain, trying to convince himself this was routine. Maybe Marcus had injured himself, too proud to call for official help. Maybe Vera was just being a good neighbor. But 20 years of police work had taught him to trust his instincts. And every instinct he had was screaming that something was very wrong. He found Marcus splitting firewood behind his cabin, working with the methodical intensity of a man trying to keep his hands busy. The older man looked up as Jonas approached, and something flickered across his weathered features. "Baby, or resignation?" "Morning, Jonas. Wasn't expecting company, Marcus." Jonas nodded toward the impressive stack of split logs. "Getting ready for another storm?" "Something like that." Marcus set down his axe, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold air. "What brings you all the way up here?" Jonas studied the man's face, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "Had some folks in town wondering about Dr. Tomlin's early morning supply run. Figured I should check if anyone up here needed help." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Jonas had interrogated enough suspects to recognize the moment when someone was weighing their options, truth or lies, confession or cover-up. Marcus Webb wasn't a criminal, but he was definitely hiding something. "Sheriff," Marcus said finally, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "If someone came to your door dying in a blizzard, what would you do?" The question hit Jonas like a physical blow. He'd known Marcus for 8 years, trusted him implicitly. The man didn't deal in hypotheticals. "I'd help them," Jonas answered honestly, "no matter who they were." Marcus nodded slowly. "Even if helping them could destroy your life, it's cost you everything you'd worked for." Jonas felt his chest tighten. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" Instead of answering, Marcus jerked his head toward the cabin. "Come inside." Jonas. "What you're about to see, it changes everything. For all of us." The warmth inside the cabin was welcome after the mountain cold, but Jonas barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the couch, where 2 figures huddled beneath heavy blankets. A woman with distinctly non-human features, elongated limbs, silver-tinged skin, large violet eyes that tracked his movement with wary intelligence. And in her arms, an infant that seemed to glow with faint inner light. "Jesus Christ," Jonas whispered. "Kethany refugees," Marcus said quietly. "Found them on my porch 3 days ago, half dead from exposure. The baby her name Zarushi would've died if I'd turned them away." Jonas felt the world shift beneath his feet. Federal law was crystal clear on this. Any contact with alien refugees had to be reported within 6 hours. Harboring them was a felony punishable by 20 years in federal prison. The woman Thesa, Marcus had called her, watched him with the resigned expression of someone who'd learned to expect the worst from human authority. "Marcus, you know what this means," Jonas said, his voice strained. "I have to call the RMD. It's not optional, I know." Marcus's shoulders sagged. "Look at them, Jonas. Really look. It's not an enemy soldier. That's a mother trying to keep her baby alive." Jonas stared at the pair on the couch, his mind racing through protocols and procedures, federal mandates, and career consequences. The Refugee Monitoring Division didn't negotiate. They'd take both aliens into custody, separate them for processing, and Jonas would never know what happened next. The woman seemed to sense his internal struggle. She clutched her child closer, whispering something in her alien tongue. "How long have they been here?" Jonas asked. 3 days? Vera's been treating them. They're stable now, but they still need medical care." 3 days. Jonas closed his eyes, feeling the weight of complicity settling on his shoulders. By not reporting them immediately, Marcus had already made Jonas an accessory after the fact. Dr. Tomlinchrist, her career was finished if this got out. "Sheriff." Thesa spoke for the first time, her accented English soft but clear. "We do not wish to bring trouble. If you must turn us in, we understand." The resignation in her voice broke something inside Jonas. He thought of his own daughter, grown now, but still the center of his world. What would he do if she was in danger? How far would he go to protect her? The storm washed out the bridge on Canyon Road, Jonas said slowly, the lie forming even as he spoke. "Communication towers still down too. Might be a few more days before we can get word to the federal boys about ... anything." Marcus stared at him in shock. "Jonas, a few days," Jonas repeated firmly. "Gives us time to figure out our options. But you need to understand I can't protect you indefinitely. Eventually, someone's going to ask questions I can't answer." Thesa nodded, tears streaming down her silver-tinged cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving us time." As Jonas drove back down the mountain, he realized he'd crossed a line he could never uncross. He was no longer just a small-town sheriff maintaining the peace. He was a co-conspirator in harboring alien refugees, risking everything he'd built for the sake of a mother and child he'd known for less than an hour. But as he thought of Zara's tiny hand clutching her mother's shirt, of the fear and hope warring in Thessa's violet eyes, Jonas knew he'd made the only choice his conscience would allow. The question now was whether his conscience would be enough to save them all. Emma Caldwell had always believed that children were mirrors of infinite possibility, reflecting back whatever light was shown to them. It was a philosophy that had served her well during 15 years of teaching from the chaos of inner city classrooms to the quiet challenges of Pine Ridge Elementary. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for the child who would change everything she thought. She knew about the nature of intelligence, compassion, and what it truly meant to be human. The call came from Dr. Tomlin on a Friday afternoon, just as Emma was finishing her lesson plans for the following week. "Emma, I need a favor. A big one." "Of course, Vera. What do you need?" A pause. "I need someone to care for a child. A very special child. Her mother is ill, and she needs someone with experience, someone patient and understanding." Emma frowned. She'd babysat for half the families in Pine Ridge at one time or another, but something in Vera's tone suggested this was different. "How old is she? About 6 months, we think?" "Emma, there's something you need to know before you answer. This child, she's not human. She's Kethany." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Everyone knew about the Kethany refugees scattered across human space since the war ended, but she'd never actually encountered one. The federal government's propaganda painted them as dangerous, unpredictable former enemies who might turn violent at any moment. "Vera, are you sure about this?" "If anyone finds out her name is Zara," Vera interrupted softly, "she's just a baby, Emma. A baby who needs someone to care for her while her mother recovers." Marcus Webb found them 3 days ago, nearly dead from exposure. Emma closed her eyes, thinking of all the reasons she should say no. Her teaching career, her reputation in the community, the legal consequences if she was discovered harboring an alien refugee. But then she thought of her classroom motto, painted in cheerful letters above the blackboard: "Every child deserves a chance to shine. When do you need me?" The drive up to Marcus Webb's cabin felt like a journey into another world. Emma had packed everything she could think of: baby supplies, children's books, even some of her classroom toys. She told herself she was just helping a sick mother and child. That species didn't matter when it came to basic human decency. Marcus met her at the door, his weathered face etched with exhaustion and worry. "Emma, I can't thank you enough for this. Thesa, the mother, she's developed complications. Vera needs to take her to the clinic for treatment, but the baby can't be exposed to other people yet." Emma nodded, following him inside. The first thing she noticed was the warmth thought, just physical, but something else, a sense of peace that seemed to permeate the cabin. And then she saw them. Thessa sat on the couch, her silver-tinged skin pale but no longer the deathly gray Marcus had described. In her arms was the most beautiful child Emma had ever seen. Zara's skin held a faint luminescence that pulsed gently with her heartbeat, and her large dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed far older than her apparent age. "She's gorgeous," Emma whispered, feeling something shift in her chest. Thesa looked up, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and desperate hope. "You are the teacher. Marcus says you are good with children. I try to be." Emma knelt beside the couch, studying the tiny face. "Hello, Zara. I'm Emma." The baby turned toward Emma's voice, and something extraordinary happened. Zara's skin brightened perceptibly, and she made a soft sound that was almost musical, not quite a laugh, but something filled with pure joy. When Emma extended her finger, Zara grasped it with tiny hands, and Emma felt a warmth that seemed to flow from the child's, touched straight to her heart. "She likes you," Thessa said softly. "Kethany children, they sense emotions. She knows you have kindness in your heart." Over the next hour, Vera arrived and prepared to transport Thesa to her clinic for treatment. Emma watched the mother's agonized reluctance to leave her child. The way she whispered what sounded like blessings or promises in her alien tongue before finally allowing herself to be led away. "She'll be safe with me," Emma assured her. "I promise." Alone with Zara, Emma discovered that caring for a Kethany infant was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. The child seemed to respond not just to words and actions, but to emotions themselves. When Emma felt calm and happy, Zara's skin glowed brighter, her movements more animated. When Emma worried about what they were all risking, the baby would fuss softly until Emma consciously pushed the anxiety aside. It was during Zara's afternoon nap that Emma witnessed something that would haunt her dreams for years to come. She was reading in the chair beside the couch when she noticed the air around the sleeping child beginning to shimmer. At first, she thought it was just the play of sunlight through the windows, but then she saw patterns forming in the light, geometric shapes that seemed to pulse and shift with mathematical precision. Emma held her breath, afraid to move. The patterns grew more complex, forming what looked almost like star charts or navigational maps. For just a moment, she had the overwhelming sensation that she was seeing the universe through alien eyes, vast, interconnected, filled with meanings she couldn't begin to comprehend. Then Zara stirred, the patterns dissolved, and everything returned to normal. That night, after Thesa had returned from the clinic much improved, Emma found herself unable to shake what she'd witnessed. "Thesa," she said carefully, "during Zara's nap today, I saw something unusual. Patterns in the light around her." Thesa's expression grew very serious. "She showed you the star paths, but she is so young." She looked at her daughter with wonder and concern. "Among my people, such gifts do not manifest until the child reaches maturity. This means she is ... special. Very special." "What kind of special?" "Investigation sense. The ability to see the currents of space-time, to chart courses through dimensions human science has not yet discovered." Thesa's voice dropped to a whisper. "It is how my people cross the galaxy to reach your world, and it is why some humans would do terrible things to possess such knowledge." Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "The government, if they found out about her abilities, they would take her from me, study her, use her gift to build weapons, or ships, or ... double quotes. Thesa shuddered. "I have heard the stories from other survivors. Children with gifts, taken from their parents and never seen again." Emma looked at the sleeping infant, this tiny being who carried within her the secrets of the cosmos. "Then we'll make sure they never find out," she said fiercely. "Whatever it takes." As she drove home that night, Emma realized that her life had just taken a turn from which there would be no going back. She was no longer just a teacher or even a temporary caregiver. She had become a guardian of something far more precious and dangerous than she'd ever imagined. In her rearview mirror, the lights of Marcus's cabin disappeared behind the mountain. But the memory of those impossible star patterns danced behind her eyes. Tomorrow, she would return to her classroom and teach her human students about math and science and the world as they understood it, but she would carry with her the knowledge that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than any of them. Could dream, and that sometimes the most important lessons came from the smallest teachers. Captain Nora Blackwood had built her military career on the foundation of absolute certainty, clear orders, defined objectives, and unwavering loyalty to the chain of command. In 15 years of service, she had never questioned a mission, never hesitated when duty called, never allowed personal feelings to compromise operational integrity. But as her unmarked vehicle wound its way up the treacherous mountain roads toward Pine Ridge, she found herself facing the most dangerous enemy she'd ever encountered: doubt. The briefing had been classified at the highest levels. Intelligence. Satellites had detected anomalous energy signatures in the Pine Ridge, area patterns consistent with advanced Kethany navigation technology, the kind of technology that had allowed the alien fleet to appear in Earth's solar system without warning 5 years ago, nearly ending the war before humanity knew it had begun. "This is Priority Alpha," Director Hammond had told her in his sterile Pentagon office. "We have reason to believe a high-value Kethany asset is in the area. It's possibly a Navigator-class refugee with intact cognitive abilities." Nora had nodded crisply, already mentally preparing her insertion team. Kethany navigators were the stuff of military legend beings who could see through the fabric of space-time itself, plotting courses through dimensions human science barely recognized. During the war, a single navigator could guide an entire fleet across the galaxy in a matter of days. If one was hiding on Earth, the implications were staggering. Rules of engagement. She had asked. Hammond's expression had been carved from granite. Retrieve the asset by any means necessary. Collateral damage is acceptable if it ensures mission success. Now, 12 hours later, Nora sat in the passenger seat of a nondescript SUV, her insertion team following in 2 similar vehicles. Half a mile behind, her orders were clear: locate the Kethany navigator, secure the target, transport them to a classified facility for enhanced interrogation and cognitive mapping. What the orders didn't mention, what they never mentioned, was that the energy signatures had been tracked to a specific location. A cabin owned by one Marcus Webb, a retired paramedic with no criminal record and no known alien sympathies, which meant either Webb was involved in something far more complex than his background suggested, or the high-value asset was someone he was protecting. Target location coming up on the right, announced Sergeant Mills from the driver's seat. How do you want to play this, Captain? Nora studied the intelligence photos one more time. The cabin looked peaceful, isolated, exactly the kind of place someone might hide if they were desperate. Standard extraction protocol. Secure the perimeter, identify all individuals present, separate, and contain. Remember, the navigator takes priority, but I want everyone alive for questioning. The insertion went flawlessly. Nora's team moved with practiced efficiency, surrounding the cabin and establishing control within minutes. But as she approached the front door, something felt wrong. There were no signs of resistance, no attempts to flee or destroy evidence, just the quiet acceptance of people who had been expecting this moment for a long time. Marcus Webb opened the door before she could knock, his weathered face resigned but defiant. "Captain Blackwood, I presume? We've been waiting for you?" Inside, Nora found a scene that shattered every assumption she'd brought to the mission. A Kethany, woman clearly not a warrior or spy, but gaunt with the hollow look of a refugee who'd endured months of starvation and fear. A local doctor who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Small-town sheriff whose hands shook as he tried to light a cigarette. And a young teacher who held something in her arms with the protective fierceness of a lioness guarding her cub. The something was a baby. A Kethany infant whose skin pulsed with faint bioluminescence, whose dark eyes held depths that seemed to reflect eternity itself. "This is your high-value asset?" Nora asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Her name is Zara," the teacher, according to the files, said quietly. "She's 6 months old." Nora felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I need to speak with the navigator." The Kethany woman Thesa, the briefing materials had called her, stepped forward. "I am the one you seek," she said, her accented English soft but clear. "But I am not what your people think I am.
Ow.
Our intelligence suggests otherwise." Thesa looked at her daughter, and for a moment, something impossible happened. The air around the infant began to shimmer, and Nora saw patterns forming in the light geometric structures that hurt to look at directly. Mathematical concepts that seemed to exist in too many dimensions. Star charts? Navigation matrices. The fundamental architecture of space-time itself, rendered visible by a child who couldn't even walk yet. "My daughter carries the gift," Thesa said simply. "I am merely her guardian." The implications hit Nora like a physical blow. Not a trained navigator, but a child. A baby whose developing mind could process the complexities of galactic navigation as easily as breathing. The kind of strategic asset that could tip the balance of power between species if someone was willing to tear her away from her mother and turn her into a weapon. Captain Dr. Tomlin spoke up, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "That child has been through trauma no infant should endure. She was dying when Marcus found her. If you take her now, separate her from her mother, ... double quotes. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to." Nora stared at the baby in Emma's arms, remembering her own daughter back home, 7 years old, gap-toothed, obsessed with horses and fairy tales. What would she do if someone tried to take Sarah away for enhanced interrogation and cognitive mapping? "My orders are clear," Nora said, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Your orders assume the navigator is a threat," Sheriff Reeves said quietly. "Look around, Captain. Does this look like a terrorist cell to you? Or does it look like a group of people trying to protect a child?" Outside, Nora's team waited for her signal. One word from her, and they would separate the mother from her daughter, load them into different vehicles, and transport them to facilities where neither would ever be seen again. It would be clean, efficient, and completely within the scope of her mission parameters. But as Zara stirred in Emma's arms, turning those impossibly deep eyes toward Nora, something fundamental shifted in the captain's worldview. This wasn't an enemy combatant or a strategic asset. This was a baby who had been born into a universe where her very existence made her valuable enough to be stolen. studied, and used. Sergeant Mills, Nora said into her cum unit, her voice steady, despite the earthquake in her chest. Stand down. False alarm, the energy signatures were from some old mining equipment up here. No targets present. The silence on the cum was deafening. Captain, are you sure about that? Nora looked at Thesa, who watched her with the desperate hope of a mother who had run out of places to hide. Confirmed, Sergeant. We're RTB in 5 minutes. After her team had loaded up and begun the journey back down the mountain, Nora lingered at the cabin door. This doesn't end here, she told the small group of unlikely conspirators. There will be other teams, other missions. Eventually, someone is going to ask questions I can't deflect. We know, Marcus said simply. But today, you gave us time. Maybe enough time to figure out a better solution? As Nora drove away from the mountain, she realized she had just committed the most serious breach of military protocol in her career. By tomorrow, she would need to file a report explaining why a priority Alpha mission had come up empty. By next week, she might face a court-martial if anyone decided to investigate too closely. But as she thought of Zara's tiny hand reaching toward her, of the trust in Thessa's alien eyes, of the ordinary humans who had risked everything to protect a child they barely knew, Nora felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. Of military service, pride in her own conscience. Some orders were meant to be followed blindly. Others were meant to be weighed against the cost to one's soul. And sometimes, the most courageous choice was knowing the difference. In her rearview mirror, the lights of Pine Ridge faded into the darkness, but Nora carried with her the knowledge that tonight, now she had chosen to be human first and soldier second. It was a choice that would define the rest of her life and perhaps the future of two species learning to share the same sky.